Hello and welcome back to another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Today is Wednesday, May 28th. Hope everybody's had a good week so far. Middle of the week, we're going to keep it going though. Got a good show for you today. First, we're going to touch on SEC meetings. SEC as a whole is meeting this week. Coaches, administrators, officials, the whole deal, the whole gang is there down in Florida. We're going to talk about some of what has been the topics of conversation, get into that. We're also going to touch on 2026 recruits that have not committed anywhere, where they could potentially end up, look at some of those landing spots. We're also going to look at 2027 guys and prospects, give some comparisons to current college football players so that we can kind of start to get an understanding of who these next round of superstars are. And then we're going to finish off by talking Big Ten rankings. We're going to continue on. We got the upper middle tier, I guess, today, about teams 4 through 6. We're getting close to the end. We're getting close to the good ones. We're going to touch on all that. But first, before I get into anything, I want to remind everybody that this show is all about you. We love hearing your comments, your questions, your insights, your opinions, your hot takes, whatever you got. We want to hear it. We want to make this show as interactive, as exciting as possible. Now, one easy way to do that, if you're on YouTube, you can use the Super Chat feature. To use the Super Chat feature, all you have to do is click the $ at the bottom of the chat box, type in your message there, send that in. This guarantees that your message gets on the air, gets read live, and it's also just a great way to support our channel, support what we're trying to build here at GSMC. We couldn't do what we do without your ongoing support, and we're so grateful to have you all here as a part of our community. And if Super Chat's not your thing, if you're not on YouTube, you can also go to gsmcpodcast.net to comment there, tip, donate. Again, that link is gsmcpodcast.net. Now, let's dive into some SEC talk. There's been a lot. What we've kind of learned so far is, first off, with the portal, pretty much everybody wants something different. So let's start with the good, though. Everyone kind of seems to recognize that 2 transfer portal windows are unnecessary in college football in that offseason. So, at the minimum, that gives us a good start, right? Okay. Everybody kind of agrees that 2 windows is not right. Where things get a little more interesting is kind of in the logistics of that. So in January at the American Football Coaches Association, I didn't even know that was a thing, honestly, but at their convention in Charlotte in January, coaches presented a proposal for a single portal window in January. Only problem, the decision makers might not agree with them. So SEC coaches, again, this week backed the AFCA proposal and have kind of unanimously decided that they only want 1 portal window in January. The only problem, they're not the ones making the decision, right? That ruling is going to be made by a group of Power Conference athletic directors in the House Implementation Committee. Yes, another committee ruling on a different part of college football. That's kind of just where we're at right now. At the Big Ten spring meetings earlier, those coaches kind of supported 1 spring window from March to April for the portal. So some administrators kind of want the single window to occur in May once spring semesters finish. The yearly clock for revenue sharing kind of resets each season then to conceivably kind of make meeting payroll easier. Again, complicated like everything else. SEC coaches kind of seem to want to have it in January. Other places kind of want it more so maybe in April or May. So where we're going to go with that, that's going to be another kind of interesting facet, is will the portal go down to 1 window? It kind of seems like everybody wants that. But is it going to be in January? Is it going to be in May? We're not really sure. Another thing, the SEC, not super happy with the College Football Playoff Selection Committee at the moment. Folks around the league are really, really upset with kind of how the 12-team playoff shook out last year, how the selection committee kind of picked some of those teams in Indiana, SMU over perhaps Alabama, Ole Miss, South Carolina. This has kind of obviously led to the push to the 16-team playoff, which we might see in 2026. We're still not sure about that. And again, with the playoff, this is all in the air too. So Greg Sankey presented multiple models to coaches during meetings on yesterday. Coaches seem to favor the 5 and 11 model that would give the 4 power conference champions and the highest ranked group of 5 champion 5 automatic bids, and then the 11 other bids would be picked by the selection committee. However, the SEC administration is not on board with this one. Coaches seem to kind of like that 5 and 11 model. The administration does not. Florida Athletic Director Scott Strickland, in particular, he was of the opinion that you should outright eliminate the selection committee completely. He was quoted by saying, "A committee is not ideal to choose a postseason." And then the end of that quote was, "I question whether it is appropriate for college football." Okay. All right, Scott Strickland. I don't know. I think kind of the whole point of the committee was getting away from the computer-based rankings in the BCS, right? Everybody complained about those models, how it wasn't kind of reflecting the on-field product. Okay, who are you going to have pick then, I guess? How are they going to have people determine who's in this college football playoff? The 5-11 proposal was something proposed by the ACC and the Big 12, kind of in rebuttal to the reported 4-4-2-2-1 model that the SEC Big 10 kind of jointly proposed, more so the Big 10 and Tony Petitti there. That format would guarantee multi-team access for every power conference and also creates potential additional revenue in the form of play-in games. So if we were to go to that 4-4-2-2-1 model in which the SEC and Big 10 would each get 4 automatic bids, the ACC and the Big 12 would each get 2 automatic bids, and then there'd be kind of that 1 automatic bid that's pretty much earmarked for Notre Dame, but the highest ranked kind of independent then, or group of 5 champion, would also get a bid. So the play-in games would be kind of interesting here. The way those would work, they would take place on championship weekend instead of just the top 2 teams in, say, the SEC or the Big 10 competing for the conference championship. There would be 3 matchups that day. The number 3 and 4 teams in the Big 10 and SEC would host the number 6 and number 5 teams, respectively. And then there would also be the neutral site championship matchups in Indianapolis and Atlanta, and which would be the number 1, number 2 teams in the conference. So the championship game participants would both get 2 of those 4 bids guaranteed, and then the winner of the 2 play-in games would also get the 2 of the other 4 bids. It's something that the Big 10 and the SEC can sell to ESPN, Fox, CBS, whoever, to kind of gain more television revenue, right? If you add 2 more marquee matchups on championship weekend, that's a big deal, and that's a lot of potential revenue in terms of TV money. Adding more cash, it's kind of just a top goal for pretty much every university since their budget sheet has changed drastically, with revenue sharing scheduled to be coming in July. Programs, colleges, universities are kind of having to work around that and say, okay, where can we maybe get additional streams of revenue? Having 2 more high impact, almost playoff type matchups for the SEC and the Big 10, that would be huge and would bring in, I don't even know how many millions of dollars that would be projected to bring in right now, but something to just keep adding to that bottom line of how are we going to make the most money. Another separation that's kind of occurring is right there, just with that, are we going to do the 5 bids and the 11 kind of committee selections? Are we going to go to the more 13 guaranteed spots in the playoff. Then another thing here too is the talking of moving to a 9-game conference schedule for the SEC. This is something that's been discussed the past few years. However, it really kind of sounds like it's only likely to happen if the SEC gets automatic bids. So if they do go to that model where they have 4 guaranteed bids every single year, then the SEC is a little more likely to move to a 9-game conference schedule. That guaranteed access they kind of view right now as needed, as coaches still apparently sounds like they prefer that 8-game model. Just makes more sense for their programs, as opposed to adding an additional SEC game to have to go through another week of really tough conference play. Coaches would rather have the 8-game slate. It just kind of makes the rest of their season easier, more manageable. And when you're looking at historical data, though, of how bids would have worked in the past, the SEC should really like this kind of model. Outside of the lost revenue of an additional extra game and a revamped championship Saturday, outside of that, just looking at the historical data, getting 4 automatic bids every year when we're not sure, we're not going to be able to predict the future. We don't know what the SEC is going to look like in 2027 or 28. Could they only have 2 teams that are maybe top 16? It's very possible. It doesn't seem likely, but it's very possible. So having 4 guaranteed bids every year, that's a really big bonus. Just knowing that every single season you're going to at least have 4 teams in the playoff. It makes a lot of sense. But another thing to look at is what happens if they go with that route and they keep an 8-game conference schedule. Could we potentially lose some of these secondary rivalries like Texas A&M, Alabama, Tennessee? Could those potentially be lost if they continue with an 8-game model down the road in the near future? I don't know. We'll see. Greg Sankey said that there's models in place right now to kind of protect those secondary rivalries in the SEC, but that's something where I don't know if they can actually finally do that. It's going to be interesting. So the administrators want 9 games, coaches want 8. It's ultimately probably going to come down to what the Power Conference commissioners decide when they meet again on the college football playoff. That's kind of the memorandum of understanding right now. However, it's kind of worth noting that the SEC coaches seem to kind of favor the ACC Big 12 proposal right now over the Big 10 proposal. It sounds messy, and it is. This is really a lot to work through right now. There's a lot going on that kind of seems all up in the air. We don't know anything for sure. We don't know what's actually going to happen. Another kind of thing to look at is everyone pretty much seemed to acknowledge that there's going to be some more help from Congress needed at some point. Yes, the settlement should help, but once it comes down, there's going to have to be some more federal guidelines. It kind of sounds like that's the opinion of pretty much everybody around the SEC. They're kind of just waiting for that. That means more going to Capitol Hill, more lobbying, more kind of putting their point of views out there. We're going to see what kind of happens. The settlement's obviously kind of a step in the right direction, but it kind of sounds like everybody is seeming to acknowledge that more assistance will be needed down the line. So right now, we're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, we're going to switch gears. We're going to talk about some young bucks in some 2027 prospects and kind of who they remind me of in terms of current college football players. So we're going to dive into all of that when we come back on the GSMC College Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces, hey. Give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip, you choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift,
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Hello and welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. On this Wednesday, May 28th, just delve a little bit into SEC, their meetings this week, and kind of some of the hubbub, scuttlebutt, whatever, the topics of conversation that have been kind of revolving around those meetings this week. We're going to switch gears. We're going to talk about some young kids now and some 2027 recruits, and who I think they kind of remind me of in terms of current college football players. Just trying to get an idea of who some of these young kids coming up could be, who could be the next future stars of college football. Always trying to look for those next big things. One guy in quarterback Peyton Houston is a guy I'm really looking at. 53 overall in ESPN's Junior 300 rankings right now. A guy that kind of reminds me of Garrett Nussmeier. So similar to Nussmeier, not elite size for the position. He's only 5'11", about 200 pounds right now. So under 6 foot, not ideal for quarterback. But if you get past that, this is a guy that can make every throw, looks good doing it. When it comes to pure passing acumen, Peyton Houston is a guy that has pretty much everything evaluators are looking for. One of the smoothest, cleanest releases in this 2027 class of quarterbacks. Honestly, in recent classes, in the past 4 or 5 years, extremely consistent mechanics. He looks the same throwing the ball every time. He knows how to get the ball to where he wants it to go. A guy that throws with power, with velocity. The ball really jumps off his hand and also is able to get the ball out really quickly. Defenses have a really hard time rushing him just because he gets it out so fast and is able to kind of get it to his receivers, get it downfield faster than they would expect. So a guy that doesn't really get rushed too much just because of his play speed and how quickly he moves to get that ball out of his hands. A guy that's really similar to Garrett Nussmeier in that aspect of just being able to make every throw, having the arm strength, having the mechanics to make every throw. Peyton Houston is very similar to that. A guy that is not currently committed anywhere, but is definitely going to be a big-time quarterback prospect for a blue blood program coming up soon, probably. Another quarterback, Elijah Haven, really interesting guy. He's actually ranked higher than Peyton Houston right now. Number 42 overall in ESPN's top 300. A guy that is kind of interesting. Similar to Austin Simmons, the future starter of Ole Miss football. Really incredible two-sport athlete. He kind of played several positions in high school and realized that his best football might actually be ahead of him if he kind of settles in at quarterback and really tries to hone in on some of those skills. So, a lot bigger than Austin Simmons is, though. This guy is 6'5", 215, so kind of similar to Joe Milton coming out of high school. Joe Milton, if you remember, former Michigan, Tennessee quarterback, guy that was a 5-star coming out, 6'5", 220, could throw the ball 85 yards. Elijah Haven's very similar in that aspect to kind of a Joe Milton. Has to still kind of iron out some of those technical quirks to really kind of maximize his arm strength, his accuracy over time. Again, kind of similar to Joe Milton in that aspect. But big, athletic, really raw at quarterback. Physical tools, though, that just can't be coached, can't be taught. And very good runner for his size, but not necessarily kind of a dynamic dual threat. This is going to be a guy that's more of a pocket passer, can use his legs when he wants to, but a guy that's going to try to extend plays more so with his arm than with his leg. Elijah Haven, if he really kind of works out some of those kinks just in terms of technique, this is a guy that has all the physical traits to succeed eventually as a next level starting quarterback. One running back I'm looking at, Kamon Spell. Now, this kid is currently the number 10 player across the country in ESPN's 2027 Top 300 for the junior class. Currently committed to Penn State, too. And if he does stay committed to Penn State, they might not be lacking a running back for that long. Still going to have probably the best duo in the country this year in Katron Allen and Nick Singleton, but maybe a lull in 2026 until Kamon Spell comes in 2027. A bit short at 5'10", but not small. Kind of built similarly to Ashton Genty. Obviously, those are really lofty expectations, but in terms of build, really kind of similarly built. Doesn't weigh as much as Ashton Genty, but kind of similar just in how their body looks. This kid, though, low to the ground, scat back, plays in kind of a single wing T offense. So it's obviously you don't really see the wing T anymore in college football. Kind of more of a throwback offense, but so plays more as both a tailback and a wing back in that kind of wing T offense. But a guy that gets lost behind the line of scrimmage, is able to kind of fit into tiny creases and then just burst up to the second level, wins foot races in no time. It really kind of has the burst to make defenders miss in the hole, making up for kind of his lack of stature or power. This is a guy that's kind of really similar to Mekhi Hughes, the new Oregon Duck running back, former Tulane star, just in the ability to kind of hide behind the offensive line, burst into that second level, get upfield, be able to beat out guys in a foot race, able to run on the perimeter really well, get to the edge, turn that corner. Similar to Mekhi Hughes, Kamon Spell is really good in that kind of area, really strong, running on the perimeter, getting to that kind of second level. That's something that he does really well, and it's something that is going to make him be a really good running back to watch out for eventually down the line. Now, a wide receiver I really like, Jameer Brown, number 2 in the ESPN Junior Top 300, currently committed to Ohio State, to the Buckeyes. Gonna maybe continue that wide receiver factory that they've had for about 5 years now. A guy that kind of reminds me of Eric Singleton Jr., former Georgia Tech star, now at Auburn, but a guy that's just a handful. Has Jamar Chase-like burst and just getting up the field, acceleration, ability to kind of take the top off of the defense. That's really similar to like a Jamar Chase, just on that elite level, able to kind of use your speed, your burst, your acceleration to just create havoc for defenses. And a guy that has the physical tools to kind of overwhelm high school defenders, but really more so uses his polished route running to kind of showcase that he already understands some of the nuances of the position. And then if you look at his pure speed, 4.49 second laser time 40 in April 2025 as a junior in high school. 4.49 is pretty incredible. 10.5 second 100-meter dash in 2024. Max speed on film of 21.3 miles per hour. This guy is a burner. He's able to just do a lot with the ball in his hands. And a guy that, if you get the ball to him on a slant route, he can cut it upfield and turn it loose at any point in time. Hopefully he can kind of develop more so some of those wide receiver skills. Still really has great route running, advanced knowledge for the position at this time, but can always kind of improve on some of the more nuanced aspects of the wide receiver position. One lineman, and this is ESPN's number 1 top 300 junior right now, is offensive tackle Kennedy Brown. Kind of reminds me of Armand Membu, former Missouri tackle, just got drafted by the Jets. A guy, though, that has the tools to really become kind of an elite coverage tackle. Based on his film, based on his really excellent performance at the Under Armour camp in Houston last month in April, really kind of stamping him as a 5-star was pretty easy. This is a guy that's not eye-popping in terms of physical stature. 6'4", which, hey man, I would love to be 6'4", but 6'4" for an offensive tackle, not super tall, not super big. Really long wingspan though, and really big hands, which are going to help him out just in terms of kind of evening out, maybe not having the ideal height for the offensive tackle position. Also probably not done growing, which is another factor here. This guy could easily be 6'6", 6'7", and that too would also address his need to kind of add some mass onto his frame. A little light right now for an offensive tackle, but a guy whose athleticism really stands out at this stage of his development, of his recruitment. Super light on his feet, really good body quickness, natural bend, and kind of at times his pass protection seems effortless. Like it's just another day in the office for Kennedy Brown. His areas of growth are pretty correctable, and a lot of it's going to come to with just much more physical maturation, just growing into his body, developing it, and going from a high schooler to, a young man, a guy that's going to add a lot more mass, a lot more weight onto his frame. A guy that's going to be scary, though, kind of when he gets everything clicking, puts everything together. Then my last guy I kind of want to look at real quick is Zyron Forstall. Zyron Forstall, number 4 overall player right now in that ESPN Junior Top 300. Kind of reminds me of TJ Parker from Clemson. Needs to continue developing his frame, which is important, but kind of already looks like a much older player. He tests well. He explodes off the ball really well with good bend, pad level, able to kind of redirect when he gets too high in terms of his pass rush, and his effort also kind of allows him to factor into pursuit when plays are kind of broken. Beyond that excellent kind of skill set, tool set, has the acumen of a player who can make the jump to college right now. Uses his hands really well, kind of shows good awareness, able to quickly locate the ball wherever it is, and a guy that's always in the right position with continued development could really be a 3-down impact defender, guy that kind of already knows where to be, what spot to be in, but just with more development, with more reps, that's just going to continue to grow. This is probably the guy that's most likely to push for number 1 overall recruit status, a guy that kind of has all the tools you want out of a pass rusher, pretty polished for this stage right now too. So Zyron Forstall, another guy to really keep your eye out for. So right now, we're going to take our second break of the show. When we come back, we're going to talk a little more about the trenches, and we're going to talk about, is offensive line play declining? Kind of seems like it might be across the country. We're going to dive into that and discuss why when we come back on the GSMC College Football Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast. presented to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Just touched a little bit about 2027 prospects, gave some comps to current college football players, and talked about who could potentially be kind of that next guy up. Right now, though, we're going to switch gears. We're going to talk a little bit about offensive line and kind of, is it declining right now? And so I kind of want to start with an anecdotal story. So let's go back to 2023-2024. Washington, the Huskies, really have a great year, pretty much run the gauntlet, get to the national championship against Michigan, against the Wolverines. Now they lose that national title, right? But one of the main reasons they got there in the first place was a wonderful, amazing offensive line. So once they lose, less than 48 hours after, it's pretty much open season on their roster. Primary targets were obvious. Their award-winning offensive line, regarded as the best in football throughout the 2023 season. Essentially, every scholarship offensive lineman on that team was contacted through intermediaries. It only got worse when it was kind of clear that Kalen DeBoer was in line to take over for Nick Saban at Alabama. Out of the 10 offensive linemen that were listed on the Washington depth chart for that national championship game only 2 seasons ago, 2 remain on the roster, and 8 of those 10 guys were sophomores or younger, so they still could have been on this Washington team. 2 remain on the roster. You look at tackles Troy Fatanu, Roger Rosengarten declared for the draft. Parker Brailsford followed Kalen DeBoer to Alabama. Julius Bulau, Nate Kalepo both transfer to Ole Miss. Jalen Clem stays for a year, but then leaves for Arizona State this offseason. So last year, new Washington head coach trotted out 3 transfers out of 5 spots to start along the offensive line. Those new look offensive line Washington Huskies, they go from number 17 in the nation to number 127 in the nation in terms of pass blocking grade. The team goes 6-7. And then in terms of the first 7 years of the college football playoff, the national runner-up won at least 11 games 5 times the next year. Since NIL has become part of the game in 2021, 2 of the 3 finalists have finished with losing records in the next season. This is the new world of college football. Transfers, pay for play under the guise of kind of NIL have created this chaotic marketplace. And at the core, offensive line, it's the heart of football, right? It requires the most clear, most coordinated action from the biggest, most lumbering athletes on the field, forces players to bulk up to these tremendous sizes while still retaining their balance, their quickness, their feet, their hands. In the era of NIL, of the transfer portal, every player is a target now. Last season, starting caliber linemen were getting offers nearing $500,000, according to CBS Sports, making for some really difficult decisions, right? If you're a starting out lineman and the school's going to pay you $500,000 for a season, that's a really good deal. And then with this, though, when you have these transfers with revenue sharing on the horizon, the offers have gotten higher. Development kind of falls to the wayside. Priorities shift. Even for the best coaches in the game, stocking a championship-level offensive line has never been more complicated. Sam Pittman, Arkansas head coach, former offensive line head coach, a guy that really knows what he's talking about in terms of the offensive line, in terms of developing a really great unit. He said, wherever I've been, the development of offensive linemen is still the same, but the keeping of them is totally different. I've been surprised when guys come in here and they're going, Coach, I need X amount of dollars. I go, God dang, man, you played in 2 games. Sam Pittman's right. This is a guy that's considered one of the greatest offensive line coaches in history after developing some of the best units of the past several years. He was the offensive line coach at Georgia when they brought in a bunch of elite players into the program, including most of the starters that ultimately won back-to-back national championships. That was a lot of Sam Pittman's development. As a head coach, though, results have been a lot more mixed. 2021, that group was great. 2023, that line really struggled. Last year, Arkansas had a solid O-line, but that was under 4 transfers. And after that season, 2 of those transfers transferred out again, along with 3 other key depth pieces. Sam Pittman, he said, now it's kind of a deal where the cohesiveness of the group is just not the same. There's so much power in the cohesiveness of the group too. He said, I think it's the most players in one area at a time, and it's a vital part of the team. So the camaraderie and the togetherness of the room is not the same. I agree with Sam. How can you ever build a unit that relies so much on the other guy, the guy next to you, relies on working together more so than any other position in football? How can you build a successful one when you have 2-3 guys leaving every single year at a minimum? When you have starters transferring out who would have previously played 2 or 3 seasons for you? How can you build and develop that? Aaron Taylor, the legendary Notre Dame offensive lineman in the 90s, he's kind of made it his life's work to bring attention to offensive linemen. He helped bring the Joe Moore Award out and make it a thing, bring it into existence, bring it into this realm where that's the only college football major honor that annually spotlights a unit instead of an individual. That's something where it's so important to offensive line play. Alex Mirabel, Miami's offensive coordinator, one of the most renowned offensive line coach, one of the most renowned offensive line coaches in the nation. He said it's the most developmental of all positions. You know why? Blocking is not natural. It's something that you have to teach from the ground up, and it takes time. You're teaching them to do something that's unnatural. These bodies are so big, it takes time to gain the core strength they need being a 345-pound man. It takes time to learn who's a good lineman. You look at even elite offensive line evaluators. Take Texas offensive line coach Kyle Flood. Signed 17 O-linemen in his first 4 years with the program, including the 2021 kind of transitional class. All 5 starters on the 2024 O-line were homegrown players, but not necessarily the most obvious prospects. Yes, DJ Campbell at guard, Calvin Banks at tackle, they were the 1 and 2 linemen in their recruiting class. But Cameron Williams was the number 6 lineman in his class, star at right tackle. Jake Majors, Hayden Connor, older players who kind of found their groove later in the career. We're not seeing that anymore. We're not seeing a Jake Majors, a Hayden Connor, where they break through after 2 or 3 seasons of kind of waiting, learning, developing. We're not seeing that. Continuity, it's paramount. It's 5 guys working together as one. You don't really see it anywhere else in football. Yes, other units have to kind of work together, but not on the same level nearly as much as offensive linemen do. The results speak for itself. Out of 40 players to earn All-America honors from CBS Sports in each of the 4 post-NIL seasons, 36 of them were homegrown players. Of the 50 players to start on a Joe Moore Award semifinalist offensive line in 2024, 39 of those 50 players, almost 80%, were homegrown. 2 of the 3 finalists, Army and Texas, were completely built through high school recruiting. So part of it comes down to priority. Elite offensive line prospects obviously are well taken care of by their original schools, but leaving that depth too, that's something that we're missing. The quality here is just not enough. And this has been the case for elite programs. You kind of look at the days of Alabama, Georgia, kind of just hoarding the best players in America and then deploying generational line over generational line. That's simply over. The top groups are leaking talent, the rest are taking advantage. Last year, the gap between number 2 Georgia and number 11 Penn State in terms of talent composite was one of the smallest gaps between programs in those 2 respective slots in recent years. It's starting to kind of drag elite teams back to the rest of the pack. Alabama, you look at in 23 and 24, 7 Alabama offensive linemen transferred from the program. 5 of them became primary starters at power conference schools. So we're seeing a big shift here. We're no longer seeing guys stay at one school for 3-4 seasons, and maybe they sit for 2 years. But then their junior, senior year, they're one of the best offensive linemen in the country because they've spent the time developing, getting their bodies right, learning how to use their mass to really be successful on the football field. We're not seeing that anymore. It's much more turnover. It's much more hostile right now, where you have offensive linemen that can also kind of just ask for $750,000 a year, and it's not completely out of the realm. Jackson Cantwell, who just committed to Miami, is reportedly going to make about $2.5 million a year to be the left tackle at Miami. That's pretty incredible. That's amazing. But it's also kind of hurting continuity. It's hurting cohesiveness, kind of the things that make a successful offensive line unit. When you look at teams that traditionally have really good offensive lines, look at the Wisconsins, the Iowas, programs of that caliber, where every year it seems they have a really great offensive line. Those guys are homegrown players. They've been developing for 2 to 3 seasons there, and they've just kind of stepped into those roles when they're ready. I think we're seeing a lot of guys that are going when they're not ready. They're going, hey, we want this big payday right now. We're not playing at our original school. I want to go somewhere else. I want to get playing time, and I want to get a big check. And hey, I can't blame a kid for saying that, but it might hurt them down the long run. And I think we're kind of seeing that right now in college football, especially on the offensive line. We're just not seeing those same great cohesive units together anymore. Will that be a thing of the past? It's very possible, but there's always a potential for offensive line play to kind of bounce back down the road. So right now, we're going to take another quick break on the show. When we come back, we're going to talk some more prospects. We're going to talk about 2026 guys and where some of those big-time prospects could potentially end up. So stick with us. We'll be right back on the GSMC College Football Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Hello and welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Podcast Network on this Wednesday, May 28th. Had a good show so far. We're going to keep going. We're going to talk a little bit right now about some 2026 prospects, where they could potentially end up. Some of these guys could really be difference makers too, I think, once they kind of get in the flow of things, once they kind of get in a particular system, get into a college weight room. There's some guys that could be immediate contributors here. One of those dudes, Derek Cooper. Now, Derek Cooper, number 12 nationally, according to Rivals, their number 1 running back. This is a guy that's got really good size for the position, too, at 6'1", 200. Getting a great read on his recruitment right now, kind of tough. It's getting a little tougher. A lot of major programs are making a serious push at this point. This kid that also just returned back from an excellent visit to Auburn. The Tigers are really trying to push super high into his recruitment. From Hollywood, Florida, goes to Chaminade, Madonna, but it's really a standout there. Gonna head to Miami this weekend, and then going to Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State. Texas is also working currently on getting him to schedule a visit after their Auburn visit that Derek Cooper just went on. An argument could be made in numerous ways here. Former Shamadam Madonna standout Jeremiah Smith, former high school teammate of Derek Cooper, obviously is with the Ohio State Buckeyes. However, Derek Cooper really continued to still show significant interest in both Georgia, and then Miami is doing everything they possibly can right now to keep him home. Kind of seems like they have a slight edge here heading into this kind of next month of visits, having the hometown advantage, and then also I think having the momentum after Jackson Cantwell, the number one recruit in the nation, just committed to the Hurricanes as well. I think those are both factors that kind of give them an advantage here for Derek Cooper. I think this one is going to be down to the wire right now. But I'm going to say Miami for right now. Derek Cooper, though, it's certainly possible that this could change pretty quickly. Right now, for what we're saying today, I'm going to go Derek Cooper. Lands at Miami, becomes a Miami Hurricane. Pairing him with Jackson Cantwell, that number one offensive tackle in the nation, a big guy that he can run behind for the next few seasons. I think Derek Cooper is going to be a Miami Hurricane. Another good running back to look at is Xavier Crowell. 5'11", 200, so decent size. Guy that's number 41 nationally from Jackson, Alabama. And honestly, right now, it would be a pretty big shocker if Crowell did not commit to Alabama. He's currently got a June 26th commitment date, so we're going to find this out at the end of next month. Texas has also worked really hard here to stay involved with Crowell. Auburn keeps working on him, obviously still being in state. They want him and his teammate and four-star quarterback Landon Duckworth. They share a backfield at Jackson High School in Alabama. Two guys that are incredibly productive. That's a really great backfield too. Four-star quarterback, four-star running back. But Auburn's really trying to pitch him and Duckworth coming together. Georgia's also in the picture here. It seems, though, that Alabama's really led for a long time. That hasn't kind of seemed to shift or change at all in recent weeks. Crowell also reclassified from 2027 to 2026 and kind of moving up with Alabama always having that lead. It sounds like this should kind of remain the same heading into his decision. I'm going to say Xavier Crowell does stay home and sign with the Alabama Crimson Tide, giving them another big-time running back prospect to potentially kind of help rebuild that run game there for the Crimson Tide. Another guy, KJ Edwards, running back here that's 5'10", 195, 47 overall nationally. A guy that kind of seems like Texas is a front runner right now. Things have gotten a lot more interesting, though, for him in recent weeks. He kind of replaced two visits that were seemingly throwaways in Baylor and SMU. Let's be honest, he was never going to either of those programs. I think he kind of just had those visits on the schedule. But he did replace those with Alabama and LSU, two programs that are much more likely to be in contention for KJ Edwards' signature on signing day. Texas A&M also kind of battling right now for this kid from East Texas that's a standout, but his relationship with Chad Scott, who's the new Texas Longhorns running back, is continuing to grow. Texas remains the team to beat, maybe by a large margin. Not really sure there, but kind of seems like KJ Edwards right now is going to be a Texas Longhorn in the long run. Another running back in Savion Hitter, number 50 nationally. Kind of a smaller back, 5'11", 180, so a little thinner, a little bit more of kind of a speed back. Kind of opaque here about where Hitter could potentially end up. Michigan had been the long runner for a really long time here. Kind of looked like things were heading in that direction, with Georgia also very much involved. This is a kid from Virginia, so kind of in the middle of the country. Not really a huge geographical bias, I would say, there. Tennessee's also surging right now in this recruitment. Volunteers might not be the clear front runner, but things are kind of trending in that direction. And Ohio State also kind of keeps getting in the mix here. So things keep changing for Savion Hitter. Doesn't really have a clear front runner right now. I'm going to say for right now, I think it's Tennessee. I think the Vols have the lead here probably over Michigan, over Ohio State, over Georgia, over some of those other programs. Kind of seems like Savion Hitter could be a really good fit for them. Having to replace Dylan Sampson, not having a ton in that running back room this year, this could be a place in Tennessee where Savion Hitter comes in right away and performs really well for the Volunteers. I think that's something that's very possible. And then another running back I'm kind of looking at is Jay Lamar. Jay Lamar is 6 foot 200, number 99 nationally, so not as highly ranked as some of these other guys. Auburn and Florida State are kind of making this interesting right now. Clemson seems to be surging a little bit for the kid from Moultrie, Georgia, and Colquitt County. But again, would be a shocker if Jay Lamar did not end up at Georgia as a Bulldog. They've made him a priority target for a really long time. Georgia running backs coach Josh Crawford also used to coach at Colquitt County, where Jay Lamar is from, and the SEC Power kind of has the edge in his recruitment right now. Clemson could make this pretty interesting because he's visiting there this weekend. Florida State's also less than 90 minutes away, with his former teammate Landon Thomas there as well. So those are two programs that could get in the mix. But I'm going to say the kid from Moultrie, Georgia, stays home, stays a Bulldog. After Georgia has really kind of made him a priority in this cycle, I think it just makes the most sense as a landing spot there for Jay Lamar. So right now, we're going to take our last break of the show. When we come back, we're going to keep marching on with my Big Ten Power Rankings. We're going to talk about teams 6 through 4 today and kind of get closer and closer to those teams who could potentially be pushing for a college football playoff run. But we're going to take a short break, and we'll be back on the GSMC College Football Podcast. Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Podcast Network on this Wednesday, May 28th. Gonna finish off the show today by continuing on with my Big Ten Power Rankings, and we're at number 6 now, so we're getting closer to the end. But I think my number 6 team, it's got to be Michigan. So the Wolverines, they had a really intriguing 2024 season, I would say. Super up and down, kind of disappointing. The quarterback play was really rough throughout the year, but they kind of bounced back at the end of the season. I had that monstrous upset over Ohio State and Columbus, that 13-10 win during rivalry week. And then you also had the upset of Alabama in the ReliaQuest Bowl. So kind of putting an exclamation point on the end of the season for Michigan. You do lose a couple of key pieces here. You lose Mason Graham, you lose Kenneth Grant, 2 first-round defensive linemen. You also lose cornerback Will Johnson, who was a projected top 10 pick at one point. Makari Page is gone. Josiah Stewart also gone on that defensive line. You lose Khalil Mullins as well as Donovan Edwards in that backfield for the running back position. You also lose tight end Colson Loveland, first-round pick as well, and offensive lineman Miles Hinton. All big losses for Michigan. But there's a plus. You have a ton of returning starters. You have 13 returning starters for Michigan, third in the Big Ten. A lot of guys coming back. Davis Warren's still on the roster at quarterback. Kendrick Bell, Peyton O'Leary, Max Bredson, Marlon Klein, both tight ends, pass catchers. Those guys are all back. You have 3 offensive linemen returning in center Greg Crippen, right guard Giovanni El Hadi, and right tackle Evan Link. So at the minimum, that right side of the offensive line has some continuity coming back. Then on defense, Jayshawn Barham is back for that linebacker DN kind of hybrid role. Ernest Hausman back patrolling the middle of that defense. Derek Moore also back at linebacker. Then you have Zeke Berry and Jair Hill both returning, as well as Rod Moore returning from injury this year. So there's a lot to be positive about, I think, with Michigan's football team this year. Think of how horrible their season went last year, how poorly things went. Despite all of that, Michigan still won 8 games last year. They still beat Ohio State, the national champion, and Alabama, a top 15 team in the country. Yes, they do lose some absolute studs on defense. You lose Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Will Johnson. Those are some studs on that defense for the Wolverines. But if the offense kind of improves this year, which it would be surprising and shocking to see their quarterback play be worse than it was last season. You bring in Bryce Underwood and Mikey Keene, both upgrades over any of the quarterbacks that played for the Wolverines last year. If the offense improves a little bit and the defense kind of retools successfully, because you still have a lot there on defense. You have Rayshawn Benny, Ernest Hausman, Rod Moore returning. There's still a lot of really good pieces here on that defensive side of the ball for Michigan. So if they're able to retool successfully on that side, and if the offense is able to get a little bit better, how far really is this team away from winning 10 games or more? They're a lot closer than people think. I think last year kind of put a weird taste in everybody's mouth, just coming off that national championship run the year before. Yes, they lost a lot of pieces, but I think the decline kind of just painted a bad picture, I would say, for Michigan, for kind of their future prospects overall as a program. This is still a really good football program. This is still a team that has a lot of talent across the board, and I think they're going to be really solid and really plucky and tough to beat. However, I think Indiana's better than them. I think Indiana's the 5th team in the in the Big Ten this year. The big question, what do they have for an encore? Spotlight is going to be on them, on head coach Curt Cignetti, after their run to the college football playoff last season. This team is going to look different, but if they can kind of avoid a letdown, perhaps they can prove they're on their way towards contending year in, year out. Really? Indiana? I don't know. It'd be kind of fun, though. But look at their roster still. You lose Curtis Rourke, yes, who was a really great quarterback for you in year 1 of the Curt Cignetti experience at Indiana. But you bring in a guy who I think is an absolute stud at quarterback in Fernando Mendoza, former Cal quarterback, a guy that really kind of showcased that he's just a gamer. I think with more talent around him, he's going to be even better this year at Indiana. So you have probably a quarterback upgrade. You have a really strong offensive line. Carter Smith's returning as that incumbent left tackle. Bray Lynch is probably going to be their left guard. You bring in Pat Coogan from Notre Dame to be your starting center this year. Khalil Benson returns after a year at Colorado. And then you have Zen Mikulski coming in from Ohio State to take over that right tackle position. This is probably going to be a strength of that team. D-line, a little shaky. You lose C.J. West, you lose James Carpenter, you lose Linnell Carr Jr., but you return Mikhail Kamara. That's the big name. This guy is one of the best defenders in the Big Ten, if not the entire country. A guy that when you look at his stats from last year, absolutely incredible. Could be even better this year as he moves into this kind of hybrid edge position. You look at their targets then too. Elijah Surratt still back as the number one wide receiver after a really great year last year. E.J. Williams also back, giving Fernando Mendoza 2 reliable targets that he can go to at any point in time. You do lose your 2 running backs from last year, your 2 top running backs in Justice Ellison, Tyson Lawson, but you have Kalen Black returning. You also have Ronan Hemby coming in from Maryland, Lee Beebe Jr. coming in from UAB to kind of make up for those losses. Not really sure who's going to be the main ball carrier here for Indiana, but all really solid options, all guys that could potentially get carries for the Hoosiers. This is going to be an interesting team. I don't know how they're going to do, honestly, this year. I don't see them being worse than 8-4, though, in the regular season, honestly. I think Curt Cignetti is too good of a coach. I think there's too much returning talent. Yes, their schedule's a little rougher this year, but even if you drop a couple more games than you did last season, you're still in a really good spot. I think this is probably about an 8-9 win Indiana team. I think they're going to be a little better than Michigan. I think those two are probably going to be right about on the same level, but Indiana, you got to start putting some respect on their name. I think they're certainly going to be a potential college football playoff contender, maybe earlier in the season. We're going to see, though, but I think 5 right now is a pretty good spot to have them at. Then at 4, I think it's got to be Illinois. Got to start putting some respect on Illinois' name, I think. I think Illinois is probably this year's version of Indiana from last season. Kind of seems to be a popular sentiment, popular opinion, but I just think that's probably the case. You look at, they went 10-3 last year, 6-3 in Big Ten play. You have a bunch of returning starters. You have 76% of your returning production, 3rd in the FBS ranks, including a 3rd-year starting quarterback in Luke Altmaier, a guy that's probably one of the better quarterbacks in the Big 12. Gabe Jackus returning to kind of patrol that defensive side of the ball. A couple offensive linemen returning, a couple guys in the secondary returning. There's a lot here. They won 10 games last year for the first time since 2001. And Brett Bielema's still kind of pushing to the next level right now. He said he still thinks Illinois is not getting enough talk as a potential college football playoff contender. I think that's fair, though. You have all 5 starting offensive linemen returning here. You have the entire secondary returning. And, again, you have a 3rd-year starting quarterback. You have a star linebacker. There's a lot of pieces here, and if they can kind of all mesh together well, this is going to be a scary Fighting Illini team. Finding new playmakers at wide receiver, that's going to be a big focus, who kind of steps up there. You have Malik Elzy as a potential starter, but it's going to be kind of interesting to see who actually ends up being one of the starting wideouts for the Fighting Illini this year. Hudson Clement also, too, from West Virginia. That's another wideout that I think could really get some playing time this year. They also added a handful of options on the defensive line to try and kind of supplement that secondary and Gabe Jackus. But adding to that defensive line, figure out who's actually maybe going to start, get some playing time there. That's also going to be a big concern here. And also, another kind of factor, Josh McCray, their leading rusher, did leave in the spring portal for Georgia, but you still have 2 solid options there at running back for Illinois. And Josh McCray also only had like 600 yards last year. So yes, that is a loss, but I don't think that's a huge loss for Illinois. You look at their schedule too. It's a lot more manageable than Indiana. Your biggest road matchup might be at Duke or at Indiana. These two are going to have to play each other. Potentially Washington. Then you get Ohio State and USC at home. Ohio State having to go to Illinois. I think that's going to be a more underrated Big Ten matchup this year. Then you also avoid Michigan, Penn State, and Oregon. So you don't have to play any of those 3. Your toughest matchups are Ohio State at home and probably Indiana. But there are 9 Big Ten opponents for this year. We're combined 33 and 48 in league play last year. Only Indiana and Ohio State among their Big Ten opponents had winning conference records last year. This is a manageable slate for Illinois. This is kind of the point of the roster to where this might be the last hurrah with this current iteration of the Illinois Fighting Illini. This is their year. This was their time. The schedule is manageable. They can make a push. I think it's just a matter of time right now. But that's why I think I have Illinois as the 4th best team in the Big Ten. So with that, we are going to end our show for today. Thank you so much for tuning in to the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Please remember to subscribe, like, and follow the show. And if you want, you can also go to gsmcpodcast.net to tip, donate, leave a comment or question there. And you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or TikTok. Thank you so much, and have a great day.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.